So this week, a guy got called out by Dave Smith in the most hilarious way. He basically challenged Dave Smith to debate.
Oh, I saw like peripheral.
And like the guy has 2,000 Twitter followers and like a tiny blog.
Penis. Oh, yeah. Hey everybody, welcome back to Human Reaction, your weekly source for independent commentary on news, politics, and culture, where it's always our mission to give you the tools you need to cut through media misdirection and resist the mono-narrative. Today we're diving into a very viral topic on the internet. David, what are we talking about?
Some New York financiers in the news again. Well, we've never heard of him. It's Jeffrey Epstein. Yeah. We can't say his name for the first 5 minutes of the video. Otherwise, we're going to get
we're not doing that. We're not doing that nonsense.
Push down, and then we'll bring it back in. But
yeah,
everyone knows what I'm talking about. New documents released. He's the Tupac of pedophilia. All right, go ahead, Kyle.
Well, this is going to be an episode, that's for sure. Like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to us: Spotify, YouTube, Rumble, wherever it may be, as we dive into this juicy topic.
And we are 20 subscribers away on YouTube. So subscribe to our YouTube
from
600.
From infinity.
From infinity, that's right. So we need the last 20 of you to get us to infinity. Thanks.
Well, I don't even trust that this episode's going to air, because last time we talked about anything
remotely similar.
Yeah.
That's true. If you're seeing this, it is an actual miracle, and we're glad you're here. Okay, let's dive right in. So who is this Jeffrey Epstein guy, and why does he matter?
Well, one, so to start from, ground zero, what's clearly known, dude from New York, came out of nowhere, became a very famous financier, pictured with all kinds of wealthy people, including Donald Trump. Especially in the 90s, 80s and 90s. He was all over the place.
Yeah, Bill Clinton, Elon Musk, like everybody's had pictures with him or Ghislaine.
Right. All kinds of famous parties. He's known for these parties.
Tons of celebrities.
Yeah, in the early 2000s, he gets caught and fully prosecuted. Spends a little bit of time in jail.
Caught for what? Sorry.
Yeah, I was about to get there, man. Jeez.
Okay.
Yeah, geez.
Okay.
All right. You could be the voice of questionings, but you got to let me finish the sentence.
Caught for what, David? Go on, answer the question.
Tell us, David.
Soliciting prostitution from a minor.
Oh.
And he gets a very light slap on the wrist for that. In 2015, there's another civil lawsuit. A civil lawsuit's filed with a ton of depositions. 2019, he's arrested again. He dies in prison soon afterwards. Probably didn't kill himself. And we can get into that at some point in here, because I think the physical evidence there is very interesting. In 2021, his partner in crime, Ghislaine?
I believe it's Ghislaine.
Ghislaine. I always want to say Ghislaine.
Well, maybe more appropriate, but we'll go with Ghislaine for now.
Miss Maxwell, his kind of paramour, partner, madam.
Yeah.
He's procuring these young women and like this, like, you want to be a model, want to be a masseuse, sort of thing.
And she's also like a very high society woman back in England too. Mm-hmm. Like she's the one with all the connections to like the royal family and all like the big wigs over there. And there's a lot of reasons, which we'll probably dig into later, of why those connections exist.
Yeah.
So after he's, after he dies, there's still a ton of pressure from the grassroots, from the internet, to do something about this, right? And she's still out running around, and it wasn't until 2021 where she gets arrested. And then has now been sentenced to, trafficking. And there's kind of like a couple like different claims here that get confused, I think. Is you have the early 2000s case, which was pretty narrow, which was just things that happened in Florida. It wasn't an international trafficking sex ring. But the 2019 case looked like it was heading in that direction. But he had he had an agreement with the U.S. government. And we'll get into that. And then the 2021 case really proves with a court process that there was an international sex ring. What was the purpose of that ring? Who was Jeffrey Epstein's clients? Why did they do that? He could have done anything with all this money, but he chose to do a very specific set of things, connecting himself to all of these very famous people. And differentiating what we know from that from a lot of like the QAnon conspiracy theory stuff that's out there about it as well. That takes things probably in an unreasonable direction, perhaps, and kind of grounding us as firmly as kind of what we do know. And what we know is enough. What we know, it's enough to raise alarm to get to know more.
Yeah.
Because it does suggest that our government or other intelligence agencies were involved in some major way with Jeffrey Epstein.
We're not doing
And-
that.
I feel like we already said Maxwell.
I'm pretty
Like,
sure
it's
we did.
gonna
It's
be
been
the
5
same.
minutes yet? Are we?
Yeah, no,
we don't
we're
have
not.
the clock on.
The
geez.
reason why Dave's joking around about that is because I was just talking about how the Patrick Bet David podcast, apparently they had a bunch of weird YouTube live stream issues as soon as they put the name into their title. And he was just talking about that this morning on Twitter. So
One thing that we get to is the Miami Herald is one of the reasons why we're having this new trove of released documentation from the 2015 trial, is because they've been pursuing a lawsuit for public right to know. So I want to, really quick make a quick point about this is the appropriate role for the press,
Sure.
is to create accountability with the government and elites and people like this to draw out what was really going on in this case. This actually exonerates some people who are loosely connected with Epstein in some ways. It lightly exonerates. It kind of says, it gives a person's testimony about that person's connection to Epstein.
Sure.
Gives us more information we otherwise had. They had some pictures of him. We had some accusations. Now we have more context. Other people, it condemns pretty substantially.
Yeah.
So that's the question. And then the fear, I think, of the media elite is that people are going to just see these names and they're going to be like, well, they're all, pedos.
Right.
When they're not, at least according to the information that we have.
Well, what it gives the media the opportunity to do is to say this person's name appeared in the documents, therefore they're guilty.
Right.
Regardless of what it actually says about them in those documents, right?
And there's a lot of bad faith actors online doing that right now.
Right.
Like there's a whole bunch of people trying to say Trump was Jeffrey Epstein's best buddy, et cetera, and has the video documentation of them hanging out, right?
Sure.
yeah, but then there's also the other added evidence of like Trump did kick him out of Mar-a-Lago, right? Like,
Yeah.
But like it's the same thing as like you have Ghislaine pictured with Elon Musk, but it's because that these are these big like parties, right?
Right.
So they're going around taking pictures with people, and then that in itself is like the incriminating evidence for people that are bad faith actors. When it's not necessarily the people that were like flying on the plane to the island, right? Like that's very different.
So we had some documents previously, or like some flight logs were leaked onto the internet years ago, right? And then that sort of created a bit of suspicion around this issue. This lawsuit that these documents are coming from, as you mentioned earlier, was brought by Virginia Giuffre in 2015. Obviously, we're several years into the future there. Why are these documents just coming forward now?
Well, they were redacted from depositions taken from her and other Jane Does that haven't been released. Judges basically said, we're not going to release this because a lot of these people are incidental. For example, if I was you were giving a deposition, I was the prosecutor, I would say, well, have you ever seen, I don't know who's a famous person I could think of.
Tom Hanks.
Yeah. Did you ever see Tom Hanks there? Like, no, I never saw Tom Hanks. Well, you would be then on the Epstein list. Does that make sense?
Right, because you're in the documents.
From the
right?
documents. So some of it was that. Some of it was actual Jane and John Does, like people who were victims and not wanting to put out
Privacy
circumstantial
concerns.
circumstantial information about those people that could reveal their identity to bad faith actors. So a lot of it is that. There's also always a question in the background of how much the intelligence agencies are putting pressure on judges to prevent disclosure, right? Because these are, if he is indeed an intelligence asset, which I think the ultimate calculation is that he was.
Yeah.
The question is whose?
Right.
Intelligence asset.
Fair point. And I think we will dive into that as well a little bit later. So I guess my next question is this. So Virginia Giuffre is, like you said, one victim of this sex trafficking ring. And there are many others. Do we know exactly how many others that have at least come forward so far?
Almost 70. Different Jane Does.
So when we dive into what these documents from this release, from this case entails and the people that are mentioned here, this is, just keep in mind, this is one of 70 that we know of.
Yes.
Okay.
That's mentioned in this case.
Okay.
Could be more and other, and they're there could be people who aren't actually real witnesses or have anything of substance to add. So
in that 70.
yeah,
Gotcha.
Right. So, and then additionally that this is only Wednesday's release we're going to be talking about today. More came out this morning that we're recording this podcast, and then more is likely to come out. What we're talking about is thousands and thousands of pages of depositions from multiple people. And, you know, of course, once again, why this is happening is because a corporate press agency, the Miami Herald, is pursuing efforts to disclose. Right. And they should get a lot more credit from that. Like it took me a while to find out why we're finding this out now. In fact, all these internet people, look, I'm the first one to criticize the corporate press when they're wrong. But we should also praise them when they're right. And this is a great work that only a larger press agency can do. If you're a TikTok reporter, you don't have the assets to go to the government and get this disclosure done. The Miami Herald has spent that time doing that. So that's a good thing.
For sure.
Yep.
So what was in the documents?
Well, we can start off with, I think the internet's favorite one right here is...
my favorite one.
Yeah, is definitely Bennett's favorite one here. Is Stephen Hawking was mentioned in the document a few times. And in here, so he allegedly, what the document claims is that he allegedly liked watching undressed midgets solve complex equations on too high of a chalkboard. And so the question was raised, did Jeffrey ever talk to you about Stephen Hawking's proclivities? And the answer was yes, he liked that.
And we do actually have some leaked audio from the Epstein Island directly from Stephen Hawking. I believe his quote was...
I am overjoyed.
Yeah. So I think the evidence is pretty clear.
Yeah, but something else that came in there too was there was an email from Jeffrey Epstein where he was offering a reward to any of Virginia's friends, acquaintances, families that came forward to help prove her allegations are false. The strongest is the Clinton dinner and the new version in the Virgin Islands that Stephen Hawking's participated in underage orgies. So like Jeffrey Epstein was out here basically putting a bounty out for like disproving this idea.
That doesn't mean that the idea is true.
It doesn't.
Right.
No. It doesn't mean that the idea is true.
It means it means that Jeffrey Epstein denied it before he didn't kill himself.
But Bennett really wants it to be true.
Well, so
Look, I'm
there's...
sorry. None of this is funny, but like the imagery I have in my head of Stephen Hawking and the midget thing, like I
It is
cannot-
hilarious.
I
You're not
cannot
alone.
It's
help
objectively
but-
funny. Okay.
Oh,
And
100%.
it's either false and Jeffrey Epstein was just very funny and he told this woman this joke and she's taking it as serious. That's a very well possibility.
For sure. And I also want to point out, I mean, it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but it seems like these are two separate things. The midgets and the chalkboard thing is one thing, right? And that was from
I can't help
the
it.
depositions.
I think that's unsensitive, Joe.
What's
Little
the preferred
people.
nomenclature?
Little people.
The little people and the chalkboard thing. No, look, the deposition says midgets,
Yes,
so
it
I'm
does.
going to
It
go ahead and
does.
use
True,
that.
True.
That's one thing. The underage orgy, that's something different. Like is that the same? Or
Yeah, you're right. Those are
Were the midgets underage? I don't know.
I mean, that was my question.
Also,
because-
it doesn't appear to be a sex act too. Solving equations naked. I guess it's kind of a sex act.
He's just really into high intellect. Like that's his whole thing.
but not too high.
While reaching, very.
It's reaching for the
And
stars.
on your
it's the
tippy
too
toes.
high of a chalkboard is is like the thing that makes it. That's a joke. That's got to be. A joke.
mean-
like it's got to be.
True. And
it does seem like Jeffrey he just put that out there. Like it was probably a joke he was saying to someone.
maybe. And I also want to point out too that if in fact the midgets were not underage, there's no crime there per se, is there?
Other than
Prostitution?
unless there was sex acts being done,
Or
yeah.
he
Well,
paid for that? Is
If,
that-
if this was happening, regardless of age and
a
stuff like that,
striptease where you do math problems. Is that what you're suggesting right now? Sorry, I needed to complete the dots there. Is
Well,
that what you're
look,
suggesting?
I'm just trying to
like
give.
these were stripper dwarfs, and this is
I'm just trying to give.
sounds like you're playing
Stephen-
a D&D game right now.
God, you nerds, just kill me.
stripper dwarfs.
I'm just trying to give Stephen Hawking the benefit of the doubt in what is in the deposition. If the stripper dwarves weren't underage, is that a crime?
No.
Or are we just
No.
prying into some guys' sexual proclivities?
That's kind of.
Well, here's what I was going to say before we got derailed by stripper dwarves. If it's true, it showcases that that Jeffrey was like facilitating things, right? Which definitely seems to be the case from everything that has come out about this, right? Like
Yep.
it just seems that he's like a facilitator of important people's needs, we'll say.
Well, look at his email. It's gvacation@gmail.com. JEE.
I didn't even look at
vacation
that.
at Gmail. So it's Jeffrey Epstein vacation.
Yeah.
So like obviously he was kind of pitching himself as a
vacation host.
yeah.
Get your timeshare here on the island. And
So we have a ton of reporting on this. So like for example, Bill Clinton is in here. He quote likes them young, but no specific accusation.
and that's not new. That's been out there. Like that exact quote has been around in the ether for a long time.
right. And then you have Trump is in here, but there's no real substance. In fact, it's somewhat exonerating. Basically saying they ask like, well, what about Donald Trump? She says never happened. Never saw him around. Did see him around, but nothing happened when you did see him around. That sort of thing. David Copperfield. This is a newer name that I hadn't seen before. Basically, he kind of says something. He's quoted and accused of saying something creepy about mentioning recruiting other young girls. That's about it. There's no actual accusation of sex act, but there is still the ones where it's obviously the most salacious is Alan Dershowitz is in here. Now you might remember Alan Dershowitz is Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer. He is also a famous defender of Israel in America. So a lot of people are kind of latching onto this as like, but this accuser actually initially accused him and then was in the first trove of documents that we had. She literally recanted and said she might have made a mistake. But this also mentions another Jane Doe, a different person who his name hasn't been released.
Jane Doe number 3.
Has accused him of grape. You know what I mean?
Don't.
Yeah. In that sense,
We're not doing that. We're not doing that.
So now on his behalf, I have to say that he's advocated for releasing all the documents because he says it will exonerate him. That's what any good defense lawyer would do, of course. And then lastly, he has said some really creepy stuff about the age of consent laws. I'm just saying. And it's been reported a lot. And you can go to vox.com and check it out.
Yeah, and there's been some interesting interviews that have popped up around Alan Dershowitz around this. Do we want to play some of those? There's some very...
Let him defend himself, because I don't think he doesn't...
Yeah, so on Piers Morgan's show, Douglas Murray was hosting yesterday. I believe this is from yesterday. And he had a bunch of people on, and Alan Dershowitz was talking about how... we'll show you.
No, he was not a member of any intelligence agencies. I'm quite sure of that. And he was not a hedge fund guy. In fact, once you never want to tell humorous stories about Jeffrey Epstein, but he once said to me he wanted to sue a newspaper for defamation. And I said, why did they call you a pedophile? He said, no, they called me a hedge fund guy. He was very upset at being called a hedge fund guy. I don't know what his financial business was, but I can be relatively certain he was not an asset for the Mossad.
Can I just ask why, Alan Dershowitz, can I just ask why you're so certain about this? Because it does seem to have been an intelligence gathering operation of some kind, or a compromat situation, or a blackmail situation, something like that, surely.
It's possible, but I never saw any evidence of that. He was a guy from Brooklyn, Coney Island. He was very curious. He wasn't as smart as he thought he was. He didn't know as much about science as he thought he did. But I can tell you that people like Steven Pinker and people like Stephen Gould and people like the president of Harvard thought he asked good questions during the seminars that we all attended. Those seminars, I never attended a seminar after I represented him. My relationship did terminate. I continued to take his phone calls after that. Look, I don't know who Jeffrey Epstein is. He was very, very... I didn't even want to meet him initially. Look, I want everything out. I want all the theories out there, all the documents. Let the public decide. There are people who don't want things. They have things to hide. But people like me who have nothing to hide, who are not in any way embarrassed about any of these revelations, because we know we did nothing wrong. We're the ones who want all these papers out, all these documents out, and I'm hoping the judge will now release everything, every single document.
Well, those are pretty confident words from a guy who, could be guilty, I guess. It doesn't sound like he is, according to his own perspective there.
That's just being a good defense lawyer, too.
Well,
that's
true.
exactly what you would say.
But he's running cover against the conspiracy theories around it about him being a Mossad agent, which has been a very common idea around him.
Do you want to do the
What's
other one? The one where he gets way like
Yeah.
I sense defensiveness in that, don't you?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like it doesn't seem.
But it's
Did
pretty
anyone
unequivocal.
notice the guy on the right took a sip from 3 different mugs?
Well, and actually,
Eric
Eric
Weinstein.
Weinstein is somebody that I very much appreciated on the Jeffrey Epstein stuff in the past. Like, he was the guy on the right, because he's somebody that Jeffrey Epstein had approached in Harvard back in the day, and he's one of the guys that kind of raised a lot of alarms on this of being like,
Saw through him a bit.
yeah, like something's not adding up, especially when it comes to like the currency trading stuff. Like, because like Jeffrey would just come up to him and be like, I'm a currency trader, and he's like, Eric like works for Peter Thiel, and he's like very big into markets, and he's like a mathematician guy, and he's just like, things aren't. This isn't right. Something's off here.
Yeah.
And he got very weird about Jeffrey Epstein and how involved he was in like Harvard's endowment programs and stuff. Like, so Eric's been very good on this topic for a long time. But apparently he was drinking from 3 mugs.
And then here's Dershowitz responding to specific allegations on his involvement with Epstein.
Now, the one point I do want to make is that I understand all the feminist groups and the radicals who think this is the worst thing in the world, that anybody ever had any contact with Jeffrey Epstein. Where are all those radical feminists when it comes to the Hamas rapes of young Jewish girls, sexual abuse, beheadings? They are quiet. They are silent. The incredible hypocrisy of the Me Too movement. Me Too, except if you're a Jew. And I want to have a list of all the radical feminists who are pushing hard, and I understand that, to get all these names revealed. And I want to know how many of them have ever actually condemned Hamas for the rapes that we now know occurred and the murders that occurred. How many have been silent, and how many, like the National Lawyers Guild, have actually approved of what Hamas did? So let's put this in context. I'm thrilled that all these papers have come out. I urged them. I went to court. I asked for everything to come out because I knew that I had done nothing wrong, and the papers would exculpate me. What I only worry about is that maybe the judges withheld certain documents. I want to make sure every single document comes out, including the documents that cast doubt on the credibility of some of the accusers and some of the accused. The public has the right to see everything and make their own judgment. We do not put the country at guilt by accusation.
So, but what about Hamas? What's his defense there?
He's like, I'm innocent, but look this way instead.
Also, there's the distraction element of that, and there's a defensiveness once again there that is so placating, because it's not just radical feminists or Me Too people who are upset about Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah,
right? It's people who are concerned about what our government's doing. And I think that's very bipartisan. It's across the board.
Completely. Well, and it's pretty disingenuous to try to distract in that way. You know, he's like you said, he's calling out this very narrow faction of people and pointing to a completely different situation, which is atrocious. Don't get me wrong, but has nothing to do with this.
Well, it also just let's say the things in the documents aren't true about him, about what Jane Doe number 3 said. Like, all he's doing right here is really just like fanning the flames that makes the internet believe that it is, just because the defensiveness is so real there. Like, it seems like a very bad play, and you'd think that a lawyer would probably play that differently, I would assume.
If you are a small business owner looking for exponential growth, you have to connect with Adam Thune at Intellectual Patriots. He will revolutionize your business game and help you get to the next level. Adam can streamline your business practices and advertising strategies to improve your bottom line. His expertise in data engineering means he can build you the systems you need to collect and analyze market data. His mission is to provide you with invaluable insights to fuel your success. From grant writing and business proposals to digital systems integrations, even AI management, Intellectual Patriots is a one-stop shop for cutting-edge solutions. Don't wait another second. Visit intelpatriots.com to learn more. That's INTEL patriots.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at Zesty Beverages. They're on a mission to the standard American diet by crafting drinks with fewer calories and more nutrients from real food. Their lineup of delicious offerings now includes Electric Peak Yerba Mate, postbiotic sodas, keto-friendly, ready-to-drink margaritas, and hard teas. Wondering what a postbiotic soda is? Well, head on over to zestybev.com to learn more and find a retailer near you. Once again, check them out online at zestybev.com. That's ZESTYBEV.com.
So we also have the Prince of York, Prince Andrew, as one of the other major figures. And he has been questioned about this in the past. Kyle just sent you the video if you want to bring it up. It's a very interesting defense because you find... One of the things I've found about this is when asked about it, how many people really get very strange around all of these kind of questions. Prince Andrew being one of them, in trying to defend himself from, he's one of the most accused people across multiple Jane Does that he was a client of Epstein as a trafficker of young girls.
Yeah, and this interview with him a while back went super viral because of like how sweaty and nervous he seemed throughout the entire thing. Everything was just like,
as he claims that he's incapable of sweating.
Yeah, it was very weird. But yeah, here's that video.
July of this year, Epstein was arrested on charges of sex trafficking and abusing dozens of underage girls. One of Epstein's accusers, Virginia Roberts, has made allegations against you. She was very specific about that night. She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time, and that was yes, I didn't sweat at the time because I had suffered what I would describe as an overdose of adrenaline in the Falklands War when I was shot at, and I simply it was almost impossible for me to sweat. On that particular day that we now understand is the date, which is the 10th of March, I was at home. I was with the children. I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking.
Why would you remember that so specifically? Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do. A very unusual thing for me to do. I've only been to Woking a couple of times, and I remember it weirdly distinctly. As soon as somebody reminded me of it, I went, oh yes, I remember that.
Yeah, I've never heard of this medical condition where you can have too much adrenaline and then not sweat again for a time and then sweat again. Like that's I don't know. Yeah. Interesting argument. I mean, it could be true. I mean, it could all be BS.
There were also elements from that interview that I remember. That interview happened a few years ago, so my full recollection might be a bit off. But there were like, it was like you were reported, going to his house in New York, to Epstein's house in New York, and he's just like, no, I've never been there. It was like, you were the guest of honor, sir, on the list. And it was like,
there's also
like, oh, that party. Yeah.
I guess I was there.
It's like very weird.
There's also video of him there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you have him out the front door, like see his face out the door. So,
well, the other weird part to me, and this is the conspiracy end of things coming up here a little bit, is he mentions pizza.
Oh, come on.
Is that a coincidence?
No, he went to get pizza with his kids.
Or did.
There was a moment where he talks about being shot at where I also felt like was a distraction. Be like, I was in a war. Like, I'm a veteran. Like to me, that felt distraction-y.
Tried to pull on
it is an explanation, though, for the adrenaline thing, though.
Yeah, but it's just... I actually remember when this interview came out in news at that time, and we were like, why would the royal family let him do this interview?
That was the strange thing about it. It was just like, dude, like, what are you doing?
Yeah, like
you should not be doing this.
Yeah, it made it look so much worse.
So one of the other known associates is, of course, your favorite vaccine pusher, Bill Gates.
Him.
Just a simple farmer.
One of the things is that simple farmer. One of the things that is been interesting is watching Bill Gates respond to these accusations, which again puts out the weirdest vibes. We have this PBS interview as a good example.
It was reported at that time that you had a number of meetings with Jeffrey Epstein, who, when you met him 10 years ago, he was convicted of soliciting prostitution from minors. What did you know about him when you were meeting with him, as you've said yourself, in the hopes of raising money?
I had dinners with him.
Very fidgety.
I regret doing that.
Finger.
He had relationships with people he said, would give to global health, which is a interest I have. Not nearly enough philanthropy goes in that direction. Those meetings were a mistake. They didn't result in what he purported, and I cut them off. That goes back a long time ago now. So there's nothing new on that.
It was reported that you continue to meet with him over several years, and that, in other words, a number of meetings. What did you do when you found out about his background?
Well, I've said I regretted having those dinners, and there's absolutely nothing new on that.
Is there a lesson for you, for anyone else looking at this?
Well, he's dead, so in general, you always have to be careful.
This weird smile thing there.
I'm very proud of what we've done in philanthropy. Very proud of the work of the foundation. That's what I get up every day and focus on.
If Bill Gates is innocent, he did a terrible job there, and I feel really bad for him.
Dude.
If he's guilty, he's laying it out there. I mean, because the way he smiles when he says he's dead, the way he's
constantly fidgeting. He's wringing his hands together super awkwardly, touching his ring finger, which I think is sort of like a weird, tell going on there.
I think there's some Freudian thing going on there.
Maybe.
Well, we do have an email from Jeffrey Epstein to Bill Gates threatening to use the Jeffrey Epstein's knowledge of Bill Gates's affair with a Russian bridge player as an extortion scheme to get him to start a new fund with Epstein to draw more people into a global health philanthropy fund. Apparently it never happened, and this was late enough that it got caught into other trials that Epstein was in, and so it never came through. But it does show what the extortion scheme, at least a component of Epstein's ability to extort people, was.
Pretty important.
Yeah.
Especially when you're considering these are some of the most wealthy, connected, powerful people in the country, if not the world. One of which we haven't mentioned yet, who was very conspicuously mentioned in this first trove of documents from this lawsuit, was Bill Clinton. We kind of glossed over that one, but I mean, he was mentioned in the deposition as liking them young, right? Referring to young girls.
And Bill Clinton's always been one of the key figures that has existed in this.
Right.
I think a lot of it goes down to what everybody knows about his sexual proclivities. This stuff isn't.
It wasn't surprising.
Yeah, this stuff isn't really surprising to people, but he has been one of the people that has gone to the island the most and seems to have the biggest relationship with Jeffrey Epstein.
And there's the infamous painting, or was the infamous painting perhaps, at the island of Bill Clinton in a blue dress.
I think that was in his New York apartment, I think is where that painting was, if I remember correctly.
Either way, painting in one of Epstein's homes of Bill Clinton in a blue nightgown or dress with red
Monica
heels.
Lewinsky's dress, I believe, is it supposed to be.
Because
it's supposed to be this embarrassing,
Gotcha. Well, and that
funny frat boy type of thing. I think that's what it's supposed to be.
Interesting.
Well, it's also the question of the psychological warfare thing, and how that plays into him as an intel asset. Imagine if you're Bill Clinton and you show up at the New York apartment and there's this picture of you on the wall, right? But you're here for get this guy's hookup, whether it's drugs or young girls, whatever. What that does to your psychology, I have power over you symbol, that is that picture. Another one that we have evidence from this deposition on is Prince Andrew and a puppet. So the BBC did a puppet play using Prince Andrew and other members of the royal family. Somehow Maxwell or Epstein or someone got one of these puppets, purchased it, gave it to him as a gift of sorts. Kind of you're our puppet. It has a little tag on that says Prince Andrew on it. This woman alleges that they had him sit down, had her sit on his lap, had the puppet sit in her lap while they took pictures of the puppet and Prince Andrew groping her. Now, what is the purpose of doing that? Now, it sounds like a joke. Could be a joke. It could also be a psychological play to try to pull this person into your power, right? You're trying to create the symbol of them as the puppet that you control.
Symbolism.
The symbolism.
The whole symbolic language that exists there, right?
Yeah. Well, so this points to the why of all of this stuff, right? Like people could ask, well, are these people just, freaky and they like,
Well, I think the bigger
things?
question is, why wouldn't you if you were seeking power, right? If you're doing power games here, compromising some of the most powerful people in the world is the way to achieve power. And especially it's even better because you're safer if you can exist in the shadows and your puppets are the public figures, right? So whoever is behind the Jeffrey Epstein operation or whatever this thing is, which there's a lot of different speculation, we all have our own ideas here. It's just like clearly they're trying to handle reins of power in some fashion around the world.
So if we just knew that and people said that, I'll be like, well, yeah, but it could also be it's a lot of circumstantial evidence. At the time, back in like 2017, to 2019, that's, I think, largely where people were at, right? Because we didn't have this deposition. All this stuff was censored. All this was behind closed doors. We didn't really have that much evidence. That said, a tremendous amount of evidence has come out now, and we're in a very different place where that theory has now been largely validated, in my opinion. So, for example, it makes sense to meet with, some members of these folks, but if you're the deputy secretary of the Secretary of State, why would you meet with Richard Epstein twice during the Obama administration? Well, he went on to become the CIA director. This is William Burns, right? Yep. So we now know, because of the Wall Street Journal, that he has met with those folks, with that guy. Why did Jeffrey Epstein, in 2007, this is the Florida case, the Florida massaging case, why did he get a non-prosecution agreement with Jim Acosta, who was at the time, the prosecutor in Florida for that case? They cut a deal, and then he said, I was told Epstein, quote, belonged to intelligence and to leave it alone. The Daily Mail has reporting on that, as well as the Daily Beast.
Told by who?
Higher ups. He's been very vague about this, and he continues to basically neither deny it nor because that would actually make it worse. But he won't deny it, right? And then he won't really give any more information about it. But then he became Trump's labor secretary during the time when Epstein was actually prosecuted in 2019. So obviously not by the labor secretary, but that's Bill Barr. The amount of circle around him of all these questions. The Daily Mail has covered that the victims have alleged that there are videotapes made. That's number one. Number two, the ProPublic and other in public, that's the Substack by Schellenberger, have alleged that the FBI that they're on background, not to ProPublic, but other outlets, have said that there were tapes that had labels on them. Person of this age with person of this age. Now, this could just be pedos tapes, right? But there were indications that these could be tapes that were made specifically to black male people. These were done by real reporters saying on background to real FBI agents. Now, you can believe that, but you should believe that with the same amount of firmness that you believe the Nord Stream 2 pipeline story, or the same amount of, confidence that you believe in the Watergate scandal on initial reporting, which was all done on background with anonymous sourcing.
And to be clear for folks that don't know what on background means, that's a source giving you information that you can use, but without revealing their identity. That's the anonymous source thing, right?
Yeah, it usually it's actually a step below anonymous sourcing, meaning don't even mention me at all.
Sure.
But this is don't mention me, right?
Yeah.
So
these are, like you said, real FBI agents making reports on background to real journalists,
according to credible journalism about this question.
Yeah.
Now, this isn't coming from 4chan. This is coming from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. The kind of high level people we're talking about here, like Public has announced some of the connections. The Aspen Institute connects two other people, both Glenn Dublin and Tom Pritzker. Pritzker being the CEO of Hyatt Corporation, Hyatt Hotels, belongs to the Aspen Institute, which is one of the connections that they have to the to a lot of the censorship regime. Aspen Institute has held a whole ton of the censorship industrial complex type gatherings of all these nonprofit NGOs that then feed into the Twitter files and all the releases that public has been exposing with the censorship industrial complex. And there's other Intel Core connections as well. So Wikipedia shows this basic connection. The first job that Jeffrey Epstein got out after he dropped out of college was with a boys' school. The owner of that boys' school was George Barr. George Barr is the father of Bill Barr. Bill Barr was the attorney general for the Trump administration in 2019.
What's the significance of that?
He decided that it was a suicide.
He decided that Jeffrey Epstein's death in prison was a suicide.
Yeah. He said he's not going to pursue an investigation with the FBI because it was a suicide.
Do you mean Donald Barr?
Sorry.
Not George
Barr. Not George Barr.
Yeah.
Donald Barr. Is that right? Yes. OSS agent.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the other piece, is the then head of the school, Donald Barr, was an OSS agent?
Yeah, well, he was an OSS agent. The OSS was the precursor to the CIA before the World War
Office
II.
of Strategic Services.
So from World War I to World War II, the OSS was, an intel agency controlled by the U.S. Army. After World War II, it was created as its own standalone, reporting to the Pentagon directly. And it became a lot of the stuff we talked about in this podcast repeatedly when it comes to these projects that were obviously extra constitutional, additionally assassinating foreign leaders, which was considered something a republic doesn't do, to overthrowing democratically elected leaders like Operation Ajax in Iran, something we're still paying the price for till today. So the OSS agents, some people dropped off between this time frame after World War I, much. And if you read The Devil's Chessboard, which details Alan Dulles at the CIA, and it's pretty well documented, and it has some speculation into it, but I think it's very legit reporting. A lot of OSS officers went black hat after that, and either into private intelligence or were maintained as CIA assets after they left the OSS, and it turned into the CIA. The question is, was Donald Barr one of those people? And so he went to the school. He gets let go from the school, and he then...
You mean Jeffrey Epstein gets let go?
Jeffrey Epstein gets let go from the school, and then he becomes an international financier, and like that.
I think important to know too.
That's the crazy part. That's the point. That's the unexplained. That if you go around and you look at all these articles about explaining his wealth, no one explains how that happened. Right. Because one guy at the school, his son went to that school, and he got a job with that guy and became an international financier.
Yeah,
and made hundreds of millions of dollars in the early 1980s overnight. What happened? That's a very interesting question. No one has an answer to that I've been found yet.
Yeah. Well, I found it particularly interesting looking into that specific thing that Jeffrey Epstein taught math at this school and was released for poor performance.
That's what they say.
Right. And then supposedly, if that's true, right, he then goes and becomes a tax and estate planning advisor for the father of one of the students that he tutored, right, making hundreds of millions of dollars. To me, that doesn't add up right there. The release for poor performance at teaching math and then going and doing something. It's very math heavy. It's like, interesting.
Right.
Okay.
And there's also a Salon article about Jesse Kornbluth, who said that in 1986 that Epstein told him, quote, he didn't just manage money for clients with mega fortunes. He was also a high-level bounty hunter. To who? Who was his clients as he's high-level bounty hunting? To recover money. He worked for governments to recover money looted by African dictators. Other times, those dictators hired him to help them hide stolen money.
It's worth mentioning, too, on the kind of Wall Street guy stuff, is that this was his mentor and business partner, Stephen Hoffenberg, who ran one of the largest Ponzi schemes in history. He actually just died a couple of years ago.
And it got revealed in the early 90s. With that, Epstein, for whatever reason, despite being one of the major players, was not prosecuted. Why?
Why?
Hard to say.
Why is that?
Well, we do know that the CIA has a record of running black ops in America to move guns, money, and drugs, right? One of the ways to do that is to hide money using a, pyramid scheme, perhaps, to raise money for the CIA, could be one of them, to hide money from other places, maybe like an African dictator, into to an organization like that. Could be a component of that. So, and then it's important to like say like these sort of things. Like, what's the operation I'm thinking of, Kyle, where it was drugs for money in America? Iran-Contra.
Oh, okay.
Right, is a great example.
I was thinking Fast and Furious, but that was gun running.
Yeah, that was gun running.
There's so many operations.
Yeah, what was the one with Oliver North? Was it Oliver North? The cocaine and stuff, crack into
so
California?
Many operations, hard to keep track of all of them.
Some of that's Iran-Contra, but there's other ones, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me, guys, I have a cough. Try not to cough into the microphone.
Don't we all?
So, Whitney Webb, for example, she in her book, One Nation Under Blackmail, check it out on Amazon. She believes that the template was created to do the international sex traffic question was a template based upon the Pakistani Bank and Credit Commerce International. So, real story that happened. A bipartisan U.S. Senate report in 1992 said an executive at BCII trafficked girls and young women ages 16 to 20. So Epstein and Maxwell did exactly the same thing. It says in the report that this figure was grooming these girls to then bring them in, teach them how to dress and act, and then buying them clothes, and then getting to have sex with these gentlemen, and then recording that and doing that. We also have the CIA did this. The Washington Post, as well as documented by the San Francisco Chronicle, have reported that the CIA had Operation Midnight Climax, which was to bring these people and these dignitaries and other folks into brothels, record them having sex, and then use that.
And they were also testing like LSD experiments on them and stuff. Like they had the prostitutes like dosing the clients.
And we know that other intel agencies do that in America. You actually posted a Daily Mail. What was the article? I can't remember what it was about an international ring that was caught in America.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's right. I did post that. Let me bring that up.
But this is, and the whole reason why we're talking about this is to say it isn't outside the realm of possibility. In fact, it makes sense. The more you know about intel operations, the more you're like, wow, this actually makes a lot of sense for this to be an intel operation. So then the Dershowitz denial doesn't look so, well, of course, I mean, come on, this isn't, James Bond, right? If that's your idea what intel operations looks like, well, yeah, I mean, I think it's all like fancy cars and cocktail dresses and like a guy being suave. That's not what it is in reality. In reality, it sometimes looks like Operation Midnight Climax or this prostitution ring that is blackmailing officials when they come to America.
I don't remember did I post that in our public Discord? I think I did.
So who's doing the blackmailing?
Join the Discord. In this case, it would be Epstein. Is that what you're asking?
No, yeah, but I think what Joe's trying to get at is who's behind Epstein.
Right.
Because Epstein, it's doubtful, like, and I think this is just like logical. It's doubtful that he'd be like a solo actor. And
this
is a very large, sophisticated apparatus that needs to exist for all this to work, right?
Well, and yeah, exactly. And I think it'd be impossible for him to be a solo actor. Also, it seems like these are mostly, if not exclusively, well, I guess not exclusively because we have Prince Andrew involved, but mostly American politicians, celebrities, billionaires.
Not really. Actually,
are there more?
It's quite international.
Really?
Here we go. Yeah, this is actually a honeypot scheme by Russia, China, South Korea, or even Israel to ensnare U.S. officials.
Yeah.
Hiring high-end sex ring in Boston and D.C.
And this was recently, right? This was
this is reported.
2024.
Yeah,
reported
this January.
It was reported like on the 3rd. So,
wow. Okay, so we're establishing a pattern here that it appears that there are these schemes to try to entrap foreign, in the sense that we have Russia, China, South Korea, doing this thing against the United States to try to ensnare U.S. politicians or billionaires or whatever in these things, so they have blackmail over them so that they can get them to do things that they want them to do internationally. That's the benefit of the Virgin Islands connection with Epstein, is that you're outside the geographic area of the United States where the CIA technically can operate. But can it operate against U.S. individuals? They shouldn't be able to, but do they? Good question. Additionally, there's also a multi-layered argument, right? So we have the CIA argument that they learned from this Pakistani scheme in the 1970s and 80s, brought it in the 1990s, that they were doing this in America in the 1970s with Operation Midnight Climax.
So there's the CIA angle. There's also a Mossad angle. And Mossad is the CIA for Israel. That's what I think about it. So in Epstein, Dead Men Tell No Tales, there's two authors, Howard and Cronin, say that a friend of Maxwell's, Laura Goldman, believed that Ghislaine's father, Ghislaine, I always say Ghislaine.
No S. No S.
I'm hooked on phonics, folks. Father Robert was a Mossad spy. This is Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert, was a Mossad spy, and that Ghislaine carried on his work after he died.
It's also important. Robert Maxwell is like the primary connection here. Is Robert Maxwell he used to be a very important figure in British media. He was like the tycoon that owned all of the corporate press back in like the 40s. And he was really one of the main drivers for pushing for British involvement in Israel when Israel was becoming established as a state. This is where the allegations of him being a Mossad spy come from. But it's also like the British government themselves believed that he was a Mossad spy. The question to them was whether or not not if he was a double agent for Mossad, if he was a triple agent for the Soviets.
Whoa.
That was the question for them at the time, right?
Didn't he die under suspicious circumstances?
He died in a boating accident. He fell off a yacht naked in the Atlantic Ocean.
Oh, strange.
Yeah, he fell off.
While trying to solve math problems.
There's also another part of the Mossad is Ari bin Menchi. I sent you the video on Discord. He has also claimed that they were agents for Israeli intelligence services.
Oh yes, this is a great video. Yes, I did see this.
So some real quick context here too before we get into it. Ehud Barak is a former prime minister of Israel.
Well, Ehud Barak was at some point head of military intelligence in Israel. And he apparently was very friendly with Epstein. And yeah, you probably would have known about it.
The problem, Ari, with your accusations and allegations are that you're not providing any evidence that Israel was part of running Jeffrey Epstein.
Well, again, Maxwell was working for Israel. Epstein was working for Maxwell at the time, and he was introduced to Maxwell's daughter, and they were introduced to Israeli intelligence.
So this suggests that sometime in that time frame when he went from school teacher to international financier and playboy, he was introduced to Ghislaine's
no S
father, Ghislaine. I got to read it. I'm hooked on phonics, guys. And worked for him, and then was introduced to the daughter, and that's how their relationship started. So that being a frame, and then he's not the only former prime minister and high-level cabinet official that was associated with Epstein. The Jerusalem Post has done a ton of reporting on it, and you can find it on there.
Interesting. Very, very interesting.
So the question is what do we know? We know all of that. Like, there's a ton of context for this. There's a ton of common use of intelligence services for this. What we don't know is who was it for, although we have some evidence, circumstantial at best, that it was CIA, Mossad.
And it very well could be a mixture of all these things. Like
maybe UK.
It doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be like just a single agency. Like, I actually think that's an overly simplistic way of viewing intelligence operations.
And we actually know this. Alan Dulles himself was a double agent at various different times, and before he was CIA director, working with other agencies and the CIA at the same time. It's common for the CIA to have some agents who work with other agencies in a collaborative sense or in a double agent sense. In fact, it could be a triple agent, right?
Well, and there's likely, that's where the double agent, triple agent stuff comes in, because people have like mutual ties to different things. So it's very easy for them to weave their way through these apparatuses.
Well, and there is this this concept of the Five Eyes, right? Which is the intelligence agencies of
the spy apparatus
of what the U.S., the UK,
Australia,
Israel, Australia, and New Zealand, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
And so ostensibly they could all be kind of cooperating on something like this.
And the concept of that is that we're not spying on our people, you're spying on our people and just reporting back what you got from us.
Right. Just like the NSA using private data brokers to buy all of our information.
It's a way of skirting around their own laws. Right.
quick correction. It's Canada, not Israel. That's part of the 5.
Oh, my people, of course.
Never mind.
The Canucks are in on it.
Never mind. Don't mean to disparage the good name of Mossad by implicating them.
But there's no doubt that American and Mossad agencies both collaborate and compete with each other. It isn't surprising that there is, honeypot schemes. And then lastly, what is it for? Like, what do you do when you have the video and you have that person? What are you using the blackmail to do?
Well, it seems to me, and this seems to be the case for all of the Harvard, Yale stuff with Epstein, is the actual entrapment of scientists and people that are doing big innovations in the United States. It almost seems like a way of stealing IP and technology. It's there's an operation there that exists because this is something that Israel is very good at, is stealing other countries' technologies and stuff. This is something that Mossad has a clear role of doing. So it wouldn't be out of the realm of possibility of entrap, blackmail people. Okay, you're kind of working for us now. You're providing us with information that you're getting from your academic researchers in whatever division you are at Harvard or whatever.
Just so we're, leaving a trail of evidence here. Are there sources for the claim that Israel does that?
Yeah, you could probably just find an article.
Right? Just want to make sure that we're providing the receipts here and not making.
I mean, the other added thing is, if you're in an intelligence agency and you're not doing that, you're not doing your job. That is kind of the purpose of intelligence, is to get technology, get leverage, get influence for your given state apparatus that you work under.
Right. Understand what your adversaries are working on.
Yeah. It shouldn't even be Mossad does that. It should just be all intelligence agencies do that. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the big question for me around a lot of this, after going through what we know and what we think we know, is what are the American people supposed to do with this, right? Where does this go from here, right?
Well, we need a lot more information. And the question, at least, that goes from there is, why can't we get more information? And part of that is that there's an active, persistent cover-up that we have information about.
There are entities keeping additional information on this from coming to light.
We got your source too. Here.
Well, I mean, it's just a story. I literally just pulled the top story I found from Mossad stealing technology, and here's Mossad stealing 110,000 documents from Iran in one night on nuclear files.
This is from Business Insider.
Yeah, but I'm us. Sure they only do that to the bad guys. I'm sure they don't do that to us.
Yeah, I guess that would be the question: is are they doing it to their allies, right? Okay. And I mean, we just saw, if that story that we saw earlier is true about the honeypotting from South Korea,
or even
and Israel. Yeah. But also South Korea, right?
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. An ally.
It totally makes sense. In order to get leverage that helps you, we're the empire around the world, guys, right? If you're one of these smaller kind of client states to the empire, you want to compromise the politicians to continue to get better aid towards your client state and all this stuff, right?
Leverage.
These are satellites, South Korea and Israel.
And it's not we're innocent of this. We know, because of the Discord leaks, all of the stuff, all of our shenanigans in South Korea. We know that we have all kinds of relationships across the globe with Russian oligarchs and things like that we use to put pressure on Russia from angles that we like. So we do the same thing. We know that, for example, the NSA was spying on the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, and a whole bunch of embarrassing stuff about her got released with the Snowden files. So all of those things, we know that this is a common practice of competitive intelligence across the globe. The question is why what does it matter to people? Well, intelligence agency reform is something I believe in and something we can get to. We have to create a public support and knowledge of what is the goal of are we a republic or are we an empire? It comes to the crux of the fundamental questions of what does it mean to be American? Are you a citizen who runs his government? Can you run your government? Are you indeed sovereign as a citizen in America if you don't know what your government's doing because it's engaged in this sort of shenanigans? And then 2, a question of justice. Are we corrupted as a country if we allow our intelligence agencies to run a child sex ring? Even if it's by proxy, even if it's some plausible deniability and he was just an asset of them, that's still an endorsement of that activity. And it's evil and wrong, and we should put a stop to it because it's evil and wrong.
100% agree. And to clarify, I didn't say why should people care. I said, what do we do with this?
Yeah.
Because it's obvious to me why people should care.
Yeah.
I
want to make the defense there. Yeah. So the question is, why can't we get more information so we can really nail this to the ground? Right.
Yeah.
That's because there's an active cover up. Here's the case for that. Amy Robach, and we've mentioned this before on a hot mic. She's a reporter for, at the time, was CBS? ABC. And their work. And this was actually released not by Amy, not by ABC, but by somebody working at ABC who gave the information to Project Veritas. And that's how he discovered it.
Project Veritas, James O'Keefe's old outlet before he got fired, right?
Right.
That he founded from.
All that context.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us in a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton. We had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up. Hey, yep. Brad Edwards, the attorney, 3 years ago, saying there will come a day when we will realize Jeffrey Epstein was the most prolific pedophile this country has ever known. And I had it all 3 years ago.
And it's important to realize that after that happened, Amy Robach got fired for having an affair.
Which, as it's come to our attention, is not uncommon in the media business.
No. And then she has to do like an apology to her and all that stuff. But it also does show how kind of corroded the corporate press is, right? Where it becomes much more about access with the royal family. And it's also just like, I feel bad for her a little bit, but actually what she's mostly upset about here is that she had the story and she wasn't the one that was able to bring it to the public, prior to this, to all the revelations coming out. But it shows how constrained a lot of these people, like, she might just be somebody that wants to do good journalism, but she's very constrained by the apparatus that she lives in, right?
It once again proves Seymour Hersh's dictum that the world would be 1,000 times better off if there weren't editors.
Yeah.
And that's the benefit of the internet. There's no editing this podcast. We edit it. And our Mossad agent.
Bennett.
I'll just go fuck myself.
I mean, like, editorializing it.
I know.
Yeah. Bennett's not there just being like, nope, can't talk about that, guys.
Talk about that.
Yeah, I'm going to cut this clip out.
There's also one of the interesting claims here, too, that I'm very curious about is the pictures and corroborative evidence that she's bringing to the table as well, that she had and has never been on the release. That's very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, there's also added layers to this. Is just like, as more things become uncovered, what else becomes uncovered because of this, right? Like, there's a lot of ideas that could be, laid out about how the world actually works. And especially when it comes to intelligence operations, like, how deep does this rabbit hole go? Because right now we're just seeing like the surface of what seems to be some sort of very large operation in play, right?
So, for example, the FBI is saying that the safe in Epstein's house, so they went to the house in New York, they find the safe, they report from this stuff, the safe, it says, they found what appeared to be similar to what spies in Hollywood movies have in their safes. Loose diamonds, passports. One passport belonged to Epstein from Austria, but had a Saudi address. The safe also included loaded photographs of children, extremely well-organized CDs labeled young, bracket name, plus name, miscellaneous nudes, and girls' pics nude. The FBI went to the house, found that stuff, left the evidence at the scene because they, quote, didn't have the authority to confiscate it. The FBI said they didn't have the authority to confiscate the safe and the evidence of child pornography. But I feel like I have to say it again because it's so outrageous that we have to say it again, that the FBI didn't confiscate it, and then they came back a day later.
They came back 4 days later and it was gone.
Come on, man. I can't be the crazy person for saying that's suspicious, right?
No, that's suspicious. That's suspicious.
So, and then you have Agent McGuire testified that she called Epstein's lawyer, Richard Kahn, who became the executor of Epstein's estate, and asked what had happened to the items. McGuire and Kahn came within half an hour with 2 suitcases. McGuire said she should not confirm that the content of the CDs was the same, but said all the items were, as I scroll down my notes, that they were all accounted for. So,
and this is reported not by us, not by 4chan once again. This is reported by the Telegraph, right? Authenticated real reporters with editorial boards and teams, right? Now, this is obviously well after the Amy Robach thing, where it's all out in the open. But this all happens, and it's just kind of like, well, you know, isn't that just what happens sometimes?
And that Amy Robach clip is her talking about this exact stuff coming out in the open, right? So like, this is the same time frame there.
The assertion that we're making here, the connections that we're making here, is that the stuff that was on those CDs was the material evidence of all these powerful people that Epstein was blackmailing, having these relations with these underage women.
That's the theory. We don't know what's on them. It could just be his porno stash.
Right. But you said young name plus name.
Yes.
Like, who are the names?
The plus is the interesting part. Why would you need to know the plus, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which sort of implies that it's someone.
And this is
of
an
importance.
agent's word saying that this was the case, but we can't know the case because it's no longer there, right?
Right.
Well, at least some of it's returned, but not all of it. And we're like, what's there and what's not there? Why does it go? How? In the name of all that is holy, is the FBI not have the jurisdiction to confiscate child pornography from a known pornographer whom they're investigating? What world do we live in where that's possible? Well, not to mention when you combine that with the actual death of Epstein. It's that plus the Epstein, plus the fact the CIA connection, plus the Mossad connection. You pull all of these things together and you're, Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia feels like that. But you're like, what else? What other response would you have when dealing with the facts of the case?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't want to be too jaded, but it feels to me like the powerful and well-connected people who are probably implicated in this are probably going to get away with it. What's the outcome of this? Why?
I was actually just having a conversation in another kind of group that we're all part of with somebody who I know listens to this. We were talking about the book, The Sovereign Individual, which is this whole concept that the logic of violence changes over time with technology, basically. And I made the case that the allegory here is the Epstein stuff, where there seemed to be kind of in the old era, these operations that existed by whoever, and they couldn't stand up to time with the scrutiny of the internet. Like, really, internet sleuthing is what allowed all this stuff to come to the surface, and now the public at large is able to meme that Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill themselves. Like, that is a big development in human evolution, right? So and I think these types of things are going to, more and more stuff like this is going to come out. We're going to be able to pull like the curtain back and see not just Jeffrey Epstein. I think we're going to see a whole host of more stuff like this over time. So that's actually the kind of positive white pill here, despite this being such a dark situation, is that the truth does seem to be coming out more and more just because human advancement.
And will we be able to act on it? Will we be able to actually bring some of these people to justice for the crimes that they've committed?
It doesn't seem like these people can maintain the control that they've had before. Like, if you think about over the last century, like how truly controlled information was and has been compared to what it is now, where you can get information from all over the place. Some will be true, some will not be true, but we can sift through it. Before it was like, there's like one news anchor and everything's filtered through that one news. It's very easy to control one person. It's very difficult to control like tens of thousands of people, right?
True.
Of information flow. And as the people that are providing the information, right? Like now anybody can start a podcast. Anybody can have a Substack and be an investigative journalist, right? Like anybody can do this stuff. Anyone can dig into these things. that is the kind of the positive takeaway, I think, from all this.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue, actually, for us to announce the fact that we are starting a Substack.
Yeah.
And all of our sources from this show are going to be on there. So if you want to do your own verification, your own digging, go check out our Substack. We'll make sure the link is in the description. That was the big news.
Yay! I feel like we need to build that up a little bit more. I don't know.
Well, we'll have Bennett put in some like really like stirring music.
It's me giving that thing right there, and it's just like
some stirring music,
and then
Here we go. I got you.
Yeah, get on that thing, man. Come on.
That was some missed opportunity for me.
Well, look, but I totally get what you mean. Like we have bills to pay, and we could really use the support, and that's what the Substack really gave us the ability to do, is to help us raise money from our viewers. Not from an advertiser, not from a big conglomerate, fancy pants who's going to tell us what to say and what to do, but rather from the people who actually enjoy this podcast to help pay the bills around here and make sure that we can continue doing this. So really appreciate any support that you can give. It's $8 a month, right? Is that what we have it set to?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's what Substack forces us to set it to, right?
That's what they recommend.
Yeah.
I think. Yeah.
$8 a month. So if you can please do that, that would be wonderful.
And we're going to be testing things out around with it. Like we're going to be kind of testing the limits of how much we can do with the Substack.
For sure. And beyond just posting the show.
There'll also be free content on there as well. Like there's like
the show's going to remain free, right?
Of course.
This is like an added way to support us, and we want to provide some extra value as well, like some written content, maybe some extra videos down the road, stuff like that.
Stuff that's only available for our subscribers, but this will remain free for everyone to consume.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not going to put the.
And I have a juicy article. I'm going to start writing over this weekend. Ooh, I got some juice.
So maybe Kyle's juicy article will be available on the Substack when you hear this.
It's going to be around these topics right here.
We'll see. We'll see. Kyle, get on it. We need that to be live. All right.
There's going to be a lot of content that I got to crank out this weekend if that's going to be the case.
So the one that we haven't got to yet is the Epstein death. And do we want to circle there before we get done? Okay.
Did you guys, so like this just came out last night, so you guys might not have gotten to it. Did you guys see the Tucker Carlson interview with Mark Epstein,
Oh, no.
Jeff's brother?
Mm-mm.
I did listen to it. It was quite interesting. And it's basically Mark, who doesn't really have a whole lot of ties to his brother. It seems like they're kind of distant. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's not. Who knows? But it's Mark going through the evidence that he's come about of how very clearly it does not appear that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself, right? It's like goes away from like the way that the neck's cracked, how it seems very similar to much more like a karate chop situation and then a strangle.
It's just so it gets so weird as soon as you say karate chop.
Yeah, well, it's like a common. Well, he was laying out like this is just a common tactic of knocking somebody out. Is like if you get the jump on somebody, there's just like a quick snap to the neck, and then everybody's loose, and then you strangle them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is just common practice for intel like combatants, right?
For spies.
Yeah,
Just
for
makes me think
spies.
of Austin Powers.
Exactly.
Karate chop,
Judo
chop,
judo chop.
Judo chop. But have you ever seen? It's that game. He Got Game.
Nope.
With oh man, there's a great
Ray
example
Allen?
of this. What's that?
The
Ray Allen?
movie?
Yeah, he's in it.
And
so
Denzel Washington?
Denzel Washington's in it, and there's this kid, and he's talking shit to Denzel, and he just gives him like this like chop with the inside of his hand to his throat. It shows what that does, and it completely paralyzes somebody. So that's the argument: is that it's like a frontwards to the very front of it, to not a side thing, but to the front that creates trauma to the windpipe, and then you strangle them.
Yeah. And I would highly recommend that interview. It was 30 minutes long, and it goes into a lot more detail than we're going to be able to go in here. Like they showed pictures of like the layout of what the prison looked like, and how easy it would have been for somebody to sneak through. And because like there's a lot of this things like, well, somebody would have seen it, but it's like, yeah, like a prisoner who would have been sleeping in the middle of the night could have maybe seen it through like this small of a window, right? So like they go through all this like the circumstantial evidence that exists there, and it's pretty well done.
So there's and even the stuff we already had was pretty wild, right? So for example, this was if you believe the suicide story, this is the second suicide attempt. And even then, there's a lot of doubt about whether there was a first suicide attempt or whether or not his cellmate just beat the shit out of Epstein. Right? So there's that. The camera that was supposed to be looking at a suicidal inmate's room wasn't working, and nobody noticed till afterwards. It was the position the body was found in. Imagine hanging yourself off of something where you had to keep your legs straight and your butt off the ground.
Yeah, you're like at a 90-degree angle. Your
Like
body,
sitting.
right?
Yeah, and there's an inch and a
you're
half
like
between your
sitting.
butt and the ground. Come on, the
yeah.
amount of willpower it would take to kill yourself that way, it's hard to imagine.
And there's like a kind of a famous what do you call it? Autopsy guy that went through it, and he was showing the difference between like a soft hanging and a hard hanging, and all these ideas, and he's done this for like 40 years, and he's just like, yeah, like.
No way.
It doesn't make sense with anything I've ever seen in my 40 years of doing this.
Where the blood pools, how he was positioned, the position on the neck where the trauma was.
There's like 4 cracks in the bone. Like it all had the strangle elements to it. It had, frankly, the karate chop strangle elements to it. Like that's what it seemed like.
The city of New York refused to release a copy of the paramedics report. Refused to allow the paramedics to speak on the record. Epstein's brother discovered it was missing from the Department of Inspector General's 128 investigative report. Was not the paramedics' testimony was not in that report. It took 4 years to complete the Inspector General's report, and then additionally to that, when you look at like Bill Barr, his dad was involved with Epstein. He then goes on to say it was a suicide based upon what the coroner said, and the coroner said it basically without really any real like material evidence to suggest that it was. So there is just you got to check out the Tucker stuff. There's been a ton of the reporting on this. We don't want to go forever, so we can't get into all of it. And honestly, my focus was predominantly, okay, what does this mean for government policy? Ultimately, like the death of it is if he was killed by the U.S. government or some other government, they did it in a prison in the United States. And what does that mean about who we are as a country? That's the question that the listener has to, we got to get our arms around. We got to talk about, because if we don't know who we are, then we can be anything. And once we're anything, we can do anything. And that could lead to disaster.
Well, and I also hope we laid out that this isn't just like crazy conspiratorial nonsense too, where there are like here's the clear facts, and there's a lot of room for speculation still, but like here's what we do absolutely have that seems to be completely legit on this on the Epstein operation, the story.
Yeah.
And there's still plenty of room for speculation beyond this. Like we kind of just covered what we know at this point in time, right?
Should we expect that there will be any legal action carried out as a result of this stuff? Will there be any, repercussions going forward?
What I suspect is what's going to be required is an investigative committee in Congress that brings in and deposes agents, former agents, existing agents of the CIA, FBI. Yeah. And then forces either an Inspector General report or, a public inquiry. I just don't think it's likely we're going to get a public inquiry because so much of this stuff is probably going to be marked top secret, and it's going to be all closed behind the door sort of thing. It's very difficult, as we've seen with UAPs and other when it comes like even the president's son, a lot of this stuff gets tried to bind up into the intelligence agencies. They really don't like seeing this kind of disclosure. They will make the case that it makes their agents unsafe. So, and
I think the fact that it goes so deep, there's the possibility that individuals in Congress are implicated in this stuff, right? And they may not want to investigate themselves. Yeah, potentially.
And I would guess that most of the people that are on the current committees that I've been talking about so far, that we talked about this year, that are doing the UAP thing, that are doing the Hunter Biden thing. Jim Jordan, I don't think he's got these kind of ties. Other folks that are around and surrounding that, I just don't see that happening. For sure. That said, the question is they're there, and there's a different thing about taking on an actual intelligence asset of the CIA. We all have the Chuck Schumer quote talking about Trump taking on the intelligence agencies and why you don't do that in DC.
Yeah,
they've got six ways from
Sunday to get back at you,
right?
For in trying to. I mean, and that's the whole reason the Julian Assange stuff exists, right? Is that he embarrassed the CIA, and now he is a political prisoner because of it. Right. That is the entire premise of that case. And I also think, and this is where things get into a little bit more speculation, I would suspect that a lot of these operations are actually within more clandestine operations underneath these intelligence agencies. So it's not going to be as simple as just like the CIA or Mossad. Like there's going to be organizations that are not like public knowledge that these exist under, that are probably transnational. So like even just like, oh, let's fix things in America. It's like these are very these are going to be transnational operations that exist here that are kind of beyond nation states. I would suspect, but we'll see if more light comes towards those things.
Well, we will certainly keep digging into new documents as they come up and keep bringing things that are relevant to the people. Anything else before we wrap, guys?
Abolish the intelligence agencies.
Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
You heard it here, people. Thanks so much for watching. Again, check out the Substack, newly launched. It'll be in the description and the show notes. Thank you. See you in the next one. Thanks for tuning in to Human Reaction. Help us fight internet censorship by liking, commenting, subscribing, following, and sharing the show with your friends. To find us around the internet, visit linktree.com/humanreactionpod.